Delighted to be there to actually discuss that very important topic of why now is the time to rethink data and AI. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by two amazing ladies to kind of have the conversation. We will leave like 10-15 minutes for your questions. So as we go through the presentation, just write them down and push them through the channel so you can have direct answers. So the first lady joining me for this panel is Laia Collazos. She's had a brilliant international career. She's the Chief Data Officer for Coca-Cola Europacific partner. She's just coming back from the States, an old position like Head of Digital, CIO, and quite recently been appointed as the CDO for Coca-Cola European Pacific partner. So hi, Laia. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Laetitia. Hi, everyone.
So our second panelist is actually Sarah Burnett. Sarah is a renowned industry analyst. She's been working for companies like Ovum, Everest Group, in the area of AI and intelligent automation. She has a brilliant career in AI as well. She created the AI Accelerator and has just been commissioned by the Royal Chartered Institute to actually write a book on AI. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Please, really delighted to be here.
So before we actually go in the Q&A session, I just wanted to kind of tell you the story, a little story. And this is kind of my story as a woman in the computer kind of industry since the late 90s, when internet got accessible for corporate to start kind of creating the e-commerce website. So in the late 90s, when I joined Accenture, it was Anderson Consulting at the time. We actually used to have corporate communication via Octel. Octel used to be like kind of a voice system where people would just drop messages for you to listen to. And this was one of the key way of communicating. And there was email as well. And one of our jobs back then was to kind of embrace, the emergence of internet and create the first, e-commerce website that were going on. So a lot of brands were jumping on there and creating, these new things that was accessible to their customer. And what we realized, in quite short order, is actually those digital front end, needed to be connected to some of those, backend systems, and we needed a more holistic view of what was happening in there. And that's when data warehouses got created. Data warehouses were quite structured data coming through, and were allowing to kind of have visibility end to end of a company and start being able to line up some of the front end capability or digital capability with the business and the supply chain and some of the services behind. One of the things that was quite interesting as well when we were putting those e-commerce sites in place is we were drawing what people call business process and human-machine interface. So we were drawing a box for the system does that, then this human needs to do that. And at the time, it was very inward focused. It was very focused on how what the technology could do. But actually, if you fast forward 20 years, those boxes where the human needed to do something, well, actually we're a long way from there, and can be actually automated in a number of challenges. And this is what's coming to us in the sense that we have a lot more readily available technology to reinvent company. In the world of data, those data warehouses were quite stiff and quite painful to operate, and the quality of them were not great in the sense that, it was the quality of data coming in from transactional system was always not beautiful, because people working on those operational systems, their key worry was to get things going rather than, worry about the quality of the data output. So we tried to address some of those challenges with big data, but it didn't really quite work. People wanted to put all the data in that magic data lake, and we're thinking that the technology will crack on with all the hard work, and it didn't happen. But it was good enough, up until the pandemic happened. It was good enough because the data were not super high quality, but, you had experienced leader around it that could actually tune the story or make the right decision based on their experience. And I think the thing that happened during the pandemic is that experience, nobody had it any longer. It just all collapsed because we didn't see anything like the pandemic ever before. And having, medium quality data or low quality data to make decision was just not enough any longer. And that's when a lot of the exec of key companies started to call on their data teams, on the AI teams, and say, what do we do now? The consumers are consuming very differently. The supply chains are breaking down. The regulations are moving in and out. How can we actually steer our business through that? But in the same way, how can we be agile and create some of those new services? Because, the pandemic has given a lot of time to startups to actually give a good think at what they could do. So the innovation out there on the cloud being super agile has been super active as well. So, now is the time to rethink data and AI, just because data have never been as critical as they are, because we're navigating something that we never ever did before. And AI is really, helping us as well, kind of those old processes where we were drawing the boxes. It helps us reinvent really some of them, and actually live in a world where what matters is not what the tech can do, because the tech can do pretty much anything nowadays, but what the customer wants. So this is my opening on the story, and I just wanted to start with Laia, because she's been, right there in the middle of it, with a Coca-Cola Europacific partner. Can you start, Laia, telling us a little bit what is the business all about, and, how COVID impacted your business, but also how this has kind of helped actually raise the profile of the data teams, the AI teams, to the exec table?
Sure. I don't think Coca-Cola obviously needs introduction, but what we do as Europacific partners is we manufacture, we sell, and we distribute what are some of the world's most loved brands. Of course, Coca-Cola, but also Fanta, Sprite, and other non-Coca-Cola brands like Monster or Capri-Sun. So they're global brands, widely known, but our footprint is very local. So, we manufacture the drinks very close to where they're consumed, so to the consumers. In Great Britain alone, for example, we have 5 factories, right, that produce for Great Britain. And we have field sales team. We have the largest field sales workforce in Europe, and they basically work the streets. They walk the streets, they see our customers every day, from Spain to New Zealand, because we cover countries in Europe and the Asia-Pacific islands. And up to 2 million customers. So it's a very local engagement. And what happened with COVID, to your question, is basically 40% of our consumption of our drinks happens away from home, right? So not what you buy in the supermarket and then have at home with your dinner or lunch, but actually in bars, restaurants, events, concerts. That volume obviously was gone, right? So it stopped from one day to another as the different countries started the lockdown. Obviously, we were all asked to stay at home, but the supermarkets and convenience stores continued to operate, right? So we had factories running, we had field sales teams still supporting our customers because they had to go through huge change. And that was our focus, right? Safety of our staff, making sure that, where we could sell, we could do it safely. Now, the interesting part after this sort of moment, if you like, of reaction, really, that we all found ourselves, is as you start seeing obviously opening and closing, and you start looking at, at the first moments, is how do you respond to that, right? So our portfolio completely changed. Like we started selling more large packages, multi-cans, because that's what you typically sell in home, and less of a glass bottle, which is what you would have in a bar. And what happens is that typically we use systems that have statistical models. They use historical data to try and tell you basically what you need to manufacture in what line. That historical data is of no use whatsoever, right? So you need to go and find other ways to inform yourself about what to manufacture. And of course, in the places where we had good, what's called demand sensing, so using signals to understand where the shoppers are going, it's much easier. In the areas where we didn't, we got to places where we just showed footfall trends that was publicly available to try and go understand what was happening. And also we had a situation, again, over months, as in the last years, we've had ups and downs with the different waves, and where the bars and restaurants, some were open, some were closed. You just don't know, right? And you can just not sell your field sales out and figure it out. I mean, some of it happens, but there's a lot of data as well available that can help you make sure that you're effective on that. So it was, it was certainly a situation where data proved to be useful.
Awesome. And yeah, so you've collated new source of data, took some of the COVID data to actually kind of do models that were actually relevant to the situation. And can you explain to us in a little bit more depth if what I opened with has elevated the status of data and AI, in your particular organization, and if so, why?
I think there's, generally not in this context, but we say, COVID has transformed. I think COVID has accelerated some of the trends that we already had, like, I don't know, working remotely or having, virtual events and things like that, that obviously we've seen accelerated radically. And then, of course, we don't know yet what will stick, right, and what will stay. What happened, what I saw is outside in other companies, that suddenly everybody was talking math at home without obviously knowing they were talking math, about curves and models and, and transmission levels and factors, etc. And what's happening, I think, is AI math is becoming more of a conversation because people are becoming more aware of all the tools that we use and how math is basically, making decisions, if you like, or helping make decisions better. So in that context, that of course has been now accelerated, and also considering that we had already started our analytics journey. So we had a very solid digital agenda, and analytics was obviously at the core of it. We've been using analytics to optimize promos, to make sure that we segment our customers better and we can serve them better. But what happened is, I think there's a moment of general recognition, and I think it's generally in the industry, that there is value, but if you actually want to get it at full, you have to do it at scale, and you have to make sure that the data, as you were saying earlier, Laetitia, is of good quality. And there's also a reality. There's no magic wand to get the data quality right. There's no magic wand to get your data available in the right place. You have to work it. You have to work it out. Of course, there's tools that can make it easier, but ultimately it is something that you have to do. There's no data lake that will serve that. And that's in a way, and for that to be valuable, you need to obviously make sure that your exec has access and can steer that initiative. So so basically, what my team used to be a small data science team, very much focused on a handful of products, obviously where the value is now expanded to have a responsibility around data governance, of course, data science, analytics, and transformation, around obviously not only our teams but the organization. I think the key message for us is the data is an enterprise, is a common good for the enterprise, right? So we need to treat it responsibly. That's sort of what we're trying to do. And of course, at the same time as you unlock, you can get exponential value from that data.
Awesome. I think we have a survey that we run with 1,600 exec recently, and it definitely show that, if exec are elevated at, data and AI exec are elevated at the exec table, and work on, key company challenges rather than things on the fringe, transformation is really kind of moving forward versus
Absolutely.
in a team.
The first thing we did was set up a council, right, with half of the exec to make sure that first there's a part of acknowledging the data challenges, but also make sure that we put we put our investments in the right places.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Laia. So let's move to Sarah. Sarah, you've been commissioned by the Royal Institute for IT to actually write a book on AI. And I think we can we say or not say the title of the book?
Yes, you can.
It's about the autonomous enterprise. And I guess my question to you is, why do they think now is a relevant time? And, you have done quite a lot of interview, you're in the middle of your research at the moment. Is there anything that you can start sharing with us on some of the trends, new KPI, or things that can help people, listening to us today, take this journey forward?
Sure, yes. So I propose the topic of the autonomous enterprise because I believe genuinely that we're heading that way. And the reason I think it are sort of made up of 2 or 3 factors. One is that we can automate processes that use unstructured data, something that we couldn't do a few years ago. And that combined with other capabilities which allow us to automate structured data means we can take the automation in the enterprise a lot further. Secondly, the fact that you've all been talking about the need for agility as we learned through the pandemic, and also the increase in digital transactions. So the rise of e-commerce, and the models already in place with several online retailers where you order something online, the order is fulfilled by robots in the background, and then you get it delivered through your door. So that's the kind of blueprint for, I think, processes in the future. But I have to emphasize the fact that although I'm talking about the autonomous enterprise, it doesn't exclude people from the enterprise. So basically how I believe things will evolve is that a lot of the bulk processing, repetitive processes will get automated, but the people will be there to monitor them, to manage them, to handle the sensitive cases, to bring the human touch, as well as develop the business and innovate and create new products. So it's not at all doom and gloom. In fact, I believe there'll be a lot of augmentation of what humans do. And that brings me to this second part of your question, which is about what am I seeing enterprises do? And I'm seeing just that. So in terms of human augmentation, what I'm seeing is, for example, working with a global contact center operator. I found that they were using process mining and desktop mining. These are intelligence solutions that can collect data and then sequence events and paint a picture of what is actually going on at that sort of micro level in the enterprise, and be able to recommend actions such as opportunities for further automation. Another reason for the autonomous enterprise on the horizon, being able to scale automation in the enterprise, but also to help contact center agents do better at their jobs. So, for example, finding the best answers, which answer got the best result, but got the best satisfaction, provided the best customer experience. And so being able to then retrain staff and help them, guide them through more complicated questions. Another area is taking away the dull part of a conversation, which is maybe very repetitive signposting, because they can automate that part, and then passing on the more intelligent, the more sensitive type of conversation to human agents. So I think it's really important to think about this kind of augmentation and not just worry about, I hear a lot of concern about machines taking over jobs and mass unemployment. I don't believe that will happen. But basically, I think the future is actually very exciting and very many opportunities for innovation.
Definitely. There's a lot of little nuggets I really love in what you're calling out. I was at an AI conference a couple of years ago, and they started the conference with a little person in the dark with a big pole kind of banging at the window. And they were asking us, what do you think that is? And it was a little boy playing the alarm clock, in the early 90s when alarm clock didn't exist anymore. So obviously nobody would actually rely on somebody kind of knocking at the window anymore. And it's just that shift, that's happening. It's once in a lifetime kind of shift. I truly believe, especially, as companies are stretched to rethink the way they work, the way they, with agility kind of reinvent themselves, is actually very, very important at the moment. And some of those jobs are pretty dull, as you say, and some of them will be augmented, and there'll be a lot of opportunity for a lot of people to contribute to society, but in different ways. Yeah, we'll have to see this playing out. This brings me to the next topic, which is the topic of ethics and diversity. So I'm particularly proud to have an all-female panel today, to senior women leaders talking about data and AI and some of the trends. Obviously, this topic is front of mind for a number of organizations. When you speak about data and AI, people are really worried that they don't have the right talent, they don't have female, or they don't have diverse team enough to embrace this going forward. So maybe starting with you, Laia, what are your thoughts and advice to people watching us? How do you tackle some of those things, in your particular organization?
So on diversity, so probably two sides of the ethics part and the diversity. On the diversity side, I think you were saying, Sarah, that the jobs are transforming. They're not, this is not an elimination, and not only on obviously on how we augment, but also on the framing, right? AI is not, it's autonomous up to a point, right? It needs framing the problem, setting the constraint, things that only human beings can do, and that is, and there are a lot of jobs around that framing, the AI. How I guess for me there's three parts, and you have to make sure as a leader, or as any person that works in data analytics, AI, you have, I suppose, a responsibility, whatever your background is, to make sure the next generations. And it all starts with, I look at three ways: inspiring. The second one is obviously creating an inclusive environment, and the last one is acting intentionally, right? So the first one, I personally go to girls' schools. I mean, you have ways, I'm sure you have access to reach out to different communities and talk about what you do, because every little girl, little boy knows jobs like being a lawyer, being a doctor. Everybody knows somebody who their profession's very well understood, but nobody can imagine what it is like to work in AI, right? And the amount of different jobs that are required and different skills that are required to make that happen. And for little or young, kids, I think inspiration is key. Now, most of them don't have a clue about what they want to do, but you give them a message and their eyes are wide open and excited. So that's one. Second is inclusion, right? So you can make efforts in hiring, but if you don't have the right ground, nothing flourishes, right? So putting effort on inclusion, and for us, it's been front of what we do for now a couple of years, where we have a whole inclusion campaign, which starts obviously from the top with sponsorship as a trigger and clear commitment to it, but really is a grassroots movement. So we have activities around all whether it's multi-generational, gender, of course, different cultural heritage. You can't look at diversity only in one angle, because ultimately, and that applies across the organization. Now, ultimately, you can not only rely on what your organization or your, does about it. There's, again, as individuals, we have to act intentionally. And that's what, in your area of influence, what you can do. Whether if you're hiring, make it clear that you want a diverse, set of candidates. If you're not getting them, just find them. Like I recently just went on LinkedIn and found a list of, in that case, I was only getting men. So just, these are all the women that I've seen on LinkedIn that are doing this job. Like, I'm not suggesting you go after them, but they exist. Or of course, if there's people in your organization who you think could do the job, maybe, they have the potential, because it's not about what the skills they have, is they have the potential to get there. Find them and encourage them to apply. There's a lot of intentional things, little things that we can do to change, but ultimately, of course, as an organization, having that inclusion push is important.
Awesome.
I think.
Oh, thank you for that. Meaning, definitely, I share I share a number of your experience, especially around recruitment. Recruiters may have bias, actually, that women don't exist, so they don't look for them. But we are there. Look, we're a living example of it. But also cheerleading the talent on the way. Just making sure we nurture this next generation women leaders. I've been pulled up by a number of women, and when my confidence was not always super high, and those things have really made a big difference in my career. And I think those little things are super important for women. So a helping hand here, those things make huge difference. Thank you so much, Laia. Sarah, do you want to comment on the ethical part? This is a topic that's quite close to your heart.
Yes, absolutely. I think certainly as a woman in the, who's passionate about getting more women into technology as a whole, not just AI, I've been working in this field for a long time, and I've seen progress, but in very small way. I think we need to increase the pace of change, and the things that Laia mentioned, inspiring, certainly role models, all of those steps will help. But I think companies also need to start looking at their practices, take a deeper look, and this ties in with the whole ethics of technology and AI. You need to understand what it is that makes something biased, or some algorithm biased, or some data inadequate for the kind of sample that you want to be working on. You need to look at how things have been trained, what bias has been accidentally built into the training of the AI. You need to actually bring together a number of different dimensions. You need to be able to then benchmark it and go back to it and measure progress over time. There are tools that help organizations check and manage the explainability of their AI, make use of those tools. There's a lot of guidance. There's also the case for making sure that the software that you're writing is actually tamper-proof, because it could easily be tampered with, perhaps. There are companies that offer checking code and making sure that the code is secure. There are all kinds of measures that organizations could take, making sure that they have leaders in their company that are women, not just men. You know, you look at the leadership of particularly technology teams, and you often see that by far the majority are men. So, you know, how do you address that balance and then make sure that the product development and the research development, the training, all of that is, you know, takes into account diversity requirements and ethical requirements as well. So, you know, there are a lot of steps that organization could take, but I really encourage them to start now, benchmark where they're at, and then periodically check, and as well as addressing any gaps that they spot through the benchmarking.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Definitely agree. Very structured approach is actually needed, because we all have unconscious bias. This is just the way the human brain works. And to go from unconscious bias to conscious decision, very often you need those prompts. Meaning, just to give you an example, we were organizing a panel with one of my team, and she was a lady, you know, to discuss data and AI. And she kind of went with who are the usual suspects, and actually she came up with a list of guys, and I was like, well, what about the diversity of that? And she was like, oh, you know, like, so we have, you know, neural pathway that are trained, and we kind of tend to go for the path of least friction. And if we actually let that happen to us, we're very likely to, you know, walk the talk. No, talk the talk, but not walk the talk. So we will say the right thing, but if we just don't have those, you know, audit processes, you know, bringing the right people to make a decision at one point in time, or, you know, I think there's a lot of controversy around quota. I am a big fan of quota, like Christine Lagarde, which is our European Central Bank lead. I think those are just really helping prompt the right conversation and move from unconscious bias to conscious decision, even if it is to make a case that, you know, this quota shouldn't apply because you can't, but at least it forced the reflection. And I think for me, this is one of the tools that's really important to really take that change to the next level in some way. So thank you so much for this. I think we have a couple of questions coming through now. Let me ask the first one to Laia. Data quality is a major challenge for my company. How do I start solving this? What snippets would you give to somebody that's in that?
Chase the money. What I mean with that is, you know, you will never be able to fix it all, and some of us data professionals are, you know, detail, and we want to make sure that everything is perfect and organized and of great quality. And if you want, let's say, a program of data quality or data governance, as you call, to succeed, look at where the organization is focusing on to get value, whatever initiative is, because I'm sure there will be some data quality problems in that area, and start there. And then, of course, you know, over time, you get the momentum, and then you have the right structure. You, of course, need to, you know, to create the right roles. It's not as simple as I'm going to fix the quality. You need people who own the data. You need people who make sure that that data quality, obviously, you know, tools to make sure this is as automated as possible. There's a whole myriad of things you need to put in place. But start with, you know, your most valuable opportunity, and then, you know, rank them based on that.
Have an impact. Yes, Sarah, you wanted to add something?
Yes, well, I think certainly automation will improve the accuracy of data as you know, for example, just simple copy and pasting, when that gets automated, that kind of thing will improve it. But you have you have to think about the future of where the company's heading, not just, you know, the current problems with data today, but it's about how do you maintain data that is good enough for AI to make the decisions that it needs to make, and also data about processes, because it's no longer about the data that they process, but it's also about documenting the versions of processes that are automated. So it's about it's got to become one of the fundamental policies of the organization to manage the data and the processes that handle the data, so documenting them and ensuring that there are version controls and so on. And this is all part of the thing that I'm thinking about and writing about, which is the future of the organization, which will be autonomous, but it can only be an autonomous enterprise if these aspects are managed well. The approach towards it has got to be, surely, if you've already found that you are in deep problems, then you have to do some kind of an audit to get a handle on it, to see where the biggest problems are and start tackling those and initiating some kind of program of governance and managing of data across the enterprise.
Yeah, this is making me think about, I'm the conversational global lead in Accenture. We were doing some work for an airline at one point, and they wanted to automate complex baggage handling. And, this is a key topic for airlines. And actually, the automation itself was fairly straightforward. The hard bit was to actually find the answer to the question, because we would go to the call center intranet, they would have millions of documents saying different things. Then you would go to, the external website. Then, especially when they do complicated combination of flight on the airline, what is the luggage you can carry on in, and it was completely madness, because some of those things were actually embedded in legal documentation, in airline agreements or things like that, and the information was pretty much everywhere. And the hard part was for us to find the answer to those questions and curate that knowledge. I think over the last 20 years, my experience is people, used to take care of knowledge, but we just gone so fast. People just let it happen, and we kind of end up with multiple sources of information, with things that are not necessarily documented. You go in call center, one of the examples you were using, meaning I visited one where there was like printed bits in the back of the call center, and that's what they were using. And we're like, where is this from? And they were like, no, this is what we use. And all of that is absolutely needed to kind of take things to the next level. I think we have a couple of minutes for a last questions. A question from George T, which is, what are the ingredients or themes that you've observed in clients that have achieved AI at scale? So who wants to take this?
Firstly, they're brave. They have a go. They try things. They're not afraid of failure. They learn from failure. They manage the risks. And they go ahead with, if they fail at first, they have another go and another go. That is so important, because so many organizations are risk averse and they just stop as soon as something goes wrong and they won't touch it again. And that's completely the wrong thing to do. The other thing is they think in terms of reusability. They think in terms of creating blueprints, things that can be reused to scale, to do more things with the same development. So really also sharing and pooling resources wherever possible. So the concepts of centers of excellence definitely help with that side of things. So it's about thinking with scale in mind from the beginning. I think is really important.
Awesome. Is it anything you want to add, Laia, or shall we close?
I will completely agree with those ingredients.
Okay, awesome. I really like the courage, and I think, I would like to finish this panel with, we're a once in a lifetime kind of opportunity to actually reinvent the world. We need to do it very knowingly. If we do automate some of those things, and if they have bias, we will actually create a world which is not better than today. And we all have a duty of care to, think about those topics very seriously and embrace them with courage, and just make sure this is a top agenda table so we can have the right traction. So thank you very much, Lady, for your time today. I've had a lot of fun speaking with you. I wish you a very good end of day.
Thank you.